In further developments now, a back-to-school survey conducted by One Life Insurance has found 95% of parents are facing financial stress in preparing for the 2025 academic year. The second annual report also reveals that 77% of respondents are solely responsible for school fees, while 40% identify as sole breadwinners. The survey further indicates that 88% say costs associated with this period have set them back financially, leading them to compromising other expenses. Money coach Hayley Parry speaks to us about this. Thank you so much for your time, Hayley. A very interesting reading here, and one would expect that the back-to-school level and period in South Africa is expected much as it is across the globe. Does this indicate underpreparedness?
Look, I think, in South Africa, we kind of have a double whammy where back to school expenses follow hot on the heels of our festive expenses that come with our biggest annual holiday for a lot of people. And so in addition to being predictable, as you say, I think it comes off the back of the fact that people have had probably a pretty financially stretched month or two prior already, and that only further exacerbates the financial stress that a lot of people are feeling.
To what extent then can it be incorporated that the rising cost of living, particularly in 2023 and 2024, have also subsequently had a dire impact on parents?
Look, I think that's definitely coming into play as well. But I think in particular with school fees, there is an aspect to it that is also quite hard to manage from a personal money management perspective, and that's the lumpiness of it, right? I don't know what it is about kids, but they always seem to grow a lot more over the December holidays than they do any other time. So even if you thought you were fine on uniform front, I can assure you there are a million mothers, hurriedly getting new uniforms again now before school starts. So, you've got uniforms, you've got fees, you've got stationery, and then you've got other things that come in that often come in spurts, either at the beginning of the year or at the beginning of different terms. Things like extra lessons, extramurals, suddenly the kids need to go on a camp or a school tour. All of these things kind of come at parents at a fairly lumpy time, because you suddenly have 5 providers who need you to pay you this month, and then it might not be the case for another 2 or 3 months. And so, if you're just getting by on your normal cost of living side of things, and then you suddenly have this big increase, that is causing problems. And it is something that we need to tackle head on if we want to get ahead of it and in front of it.
What's also interesting in the dynamics is the single-parent households, as well as those who are solely responsible for school fees within the home space where parenting and back to school is concerned. How does South Africa look at those dynamics and factor into where we are in terms of a cultural economic space compared to the rest of the globe?
Yeah, I mean, from a South African perspective versus the rest of the globe, I'm not entirely sure, but I can tell you there was a statistic that came through in the survey that I think is linked directly to this. And that is the fact that 50% of parents now are still paying off education-related fees from last year. Now, if you are in a single income household, the chances are you one of the people who's feeling this strain even more. And so hence these kind of delayed expenses where you're still trying to sort out last year, and now you've got these new expenses coming through. And I think it talks to a couple of things, from a societal perspective, which you're asking about. I think one of the things we really have to prioritize is making sure that we get a financial education in the hands of everyone. There's a lot of focus on getting yourself a good education so you can get a good job and you can get a salary, and so too with your kids. It's why we often as parents sacrifice a lot for our kids' education. But what's often missing is, what do I do with that money once it lands in my bank account, once I start earning? And that financial education piece is missing generally as a society, I think, here. And it's something that we're really passionate about, filling that missing gap so that we can make sure that when you know better, when you know how to manage your money well, what are the tips and tricks and tools, then you can do better. And then that means that next January, you're not sitting in the same position as you are currently if you're one of those people feeling stressed about affording back to school costs.
I like that element of filling the gap. And as a final shot, Hayley, we must also talk about parents who find themselves in a very stressful position, but you are already within this precarious stance in your life. What do you do now in terms of remedying and maybe easing a little bit of pressure?
So January is a word I'm throwing around a little bit at the moment. And I think if the pain is enough right now and you don't want to repeat it next January, then the decisions that you need to make are around how can I manage my money differently over the next 12 months so that come next January, things are different. And there's one simple exercise that I would recommend every parent does, and that is look back on last year's financial expenses pertaining to education. So fees, uniforms, stationery, and those other things I mentioned, like extramurals and camps and those kind of things. And then look at what you spent over the year, divide it by 12, and work towards pre-funding that going forward. So you look towards saving that amount of money every month so that when you need to withdraw money for something education related for your kids, you've got the money sitting in a ring-fenced savings account. Because what that does is it prevents you needing to use credit to help you. And what you do is that you start breaking that credit cycle, which means you stop paying more interest, which means hopefully you've got more money in your pocket going forward. So if there's any chance of any additional income, maybe money back from the taxman or a bonus or anything, that's often a great time to start pre-funding some of these accounts that I'm talking about and breaking that cycle and changing it for you and your family for next year.
Great advice. Thank you so much for your input. Hayley Parry is a money coach talking to us about the second back-to-school report, unfortunately highlighting the financial strain that parents are currently under at this time of the year. That's how we wrap it up, at least at this hour on the business desk, and take a look at market indicators. It's a better day on the JSE, all up in the green so far.